Inca, Ukhu Pacha. If the Maya and the Aztec mapped their affairs, contest, and long pilgrimage, the Inca placed the underworld inside the Earth's own belly, Ukhu Pacha, a layered, fertile darkness where ancestors are active kin, subterranean waters and serpentine powers dwell, and richer reciprocity, not abstract verdicts, govern survival. Gates and thresholds, caves, springs, and the room beneath the soil. Ukhu Pacha is literally the underbelly, not a vague below, but a moist, seed-holding interior where earth, water, and memory meet. In Andean cosmology, the world is vertically tired. Anan or upper, Kai or this world, and Ukhu or inner worlds. A three-part architecture in which the subterranean is the place of seeds, renewal, and stored potency. The thresholds are stubbornly local and physical. Caves, rock fissures, springs, mine shafts, and deep gulls are the mouths you step through if you intend to address what sleeps beneath the soil. These were not poetic metaphors, but marked places in landscape and ritual practice. Wakas and wells were offerings, were fitted into cracks and where people made literal contact with the inner worlds. Archaeology and site tradition both treat caves and springs as deliberate portals to Ukhu Pacha. Now, ritual technology here is quietly efficient. Buried offerings, bundled goods tucked into rock crevices, libations at wellheads, and the kapakocha, assemblages of children and valuable goods. Always the living provisioned the inner world and negotiated with Pachamama's appetites. These were not theatrical props, but a kind of contracts. The huaca keep the soil's memory intact, and the fertility hidden beneath will answer in season. The vertical cosmology shapes meaning. Ukhu Pacha is the interior that stores seeds and ancestral potency. The moist, dark chamber, where growth is rehearsed before daylight. That is why subterranean waters and springs are associated with rejuvenation, and why offerings placed there read as requests to release what is stored. Rain, seed, health. The inner world is therefore both mnemonic and productive. It remembers what the surface must not forget. Thresholds are also domestic gestures, turning the soil, planting a seed, dropping a small gift into a furrow. Ordinary acts of husbandry are miniature liturgies that mark the seam between human labor and subterranean response. A farmer's daily touch is therefore theological as well as practical. Every sowing is a polite negotiation with earth power, a moment when household economy becomes cosmology. The archaeological record and colonial accounts converge on practice. People threaded offerings into caves, sank bundles into springs, and left material signs of covenant in fissures and shafts. These deposits, ceramics, textiles, coca, precious metals, are the receipts of a long-term relationship between communities and the places that matter underfoot. The rite is both local bookkeeping and a very old technology of ecological memory. By feeding the underground, communities board attention and seasonal favor. So, in short, entering Ukhu Pacha is an act with geography, etiquette, and economy. You go down because the rocks and springs are doors. You go prepared because bundles and libations make a conversation legible. And you go with the sense that the inner world is not hostile so much as particular, a household one must learn to keep. It is the kind of subterranean civility that rewards respect, correct offering, and the occasional well-timed libation. Drenthid and Psychopomps, Serpents, Waters, and the subterranean guides. Travel to Ukhu Pacha is a business of maps, manners, and very old acquaintances. The inner world does not admit strangers lightly. It prefers those who arrive with a guide, a parcel of offerings, and an appreciation for subterranean diplomatic protocol. In the Andes, the route down is controlled by chthonic powers, serpents and water beings who know the rules of under-earth passage, and by human specialists whose job it is to keep the draglets named and negotiable. The serpent is everywhere in the story. In Andean cosmology, the snake is not simply a decorative flourish, but an emblem of the Ukhu, sinuous, secretive, and horizontally at home in the dark. Serpentine imagery marks caves and springs, and water beings, often imagined with serpentine aspects, act as psychopomps and guardians of underground passages. They are the literal and symbolic keepers of what lies beneath, seed, moisture, and the slow work of growth. The serpent's presence signals that you are where the earth keeps its ledger. So, treat it with respect. Do not attempt small talk about weather. Now, this chthonic register complements the sky animal triads above ground, where the condor circles the upper air and the puma patrols the middle world. The serpent belongs to the interior. Together, they form a cosmological team, condor, puma, and serpent, as vertical partners who mediate the cosmos' three tiers. This is not poetry for its own sake, but a working taxonomy. You see, each animal marks a domain, and each domain requires particular know-how when passage is necessary. Practitioners make these passages possible. Priests, amaltas, or wise teachers, cave keepers, and specialist ritualists hold the place names, songs, and offerings to delight a safe trek. And these technicians do more than pray. They perform calibrated acts. They call the place by its ancestral name. They intone songs whose cadence matches the cave's echo. And they arrange bundles that the inner powers recognize as correct freight. The specialist's competence is both mnemonic and technical. They remember which offerings a given spring prefers and which tune convinces a particular water spirit to power the current while passing home. So, in short, they are the local guides you hope to find if you have to cross a damp cliff after dark. Now, ancestors are not passive beneficiaries of ritual. They act as active kin. Mallki, or mummified ancestors or preserved remains, appear in Andean practice as interlocutors who assist passage, swear covenants, and intervene on behalf of kin. Far from being solemn relics, mallki function as social people with agency. You consult them, feed them, and in some contexts they are carried in procession to lend their authority to a negotiation with earth power. A well-intended mallki is the family's diplomatic passport in subterranean affairs. Bundles and offerings are the currency of transit. Buried packets, dispatchal like assemblages, coca, maize, shells, and small textiles are negotiated right. They are practical payments and mnemonic receipts that anchor identity below. Contemporary dispatcher practices, ritual bundles composed of symbolic goods and compacted with intention. Continue an ancient logic. Things are put into the earth in exchange for intentions, favors, and the release of stored potency. These parcels are not a mere superstition. They are structured communications, carefully composed so the underground powers know who is calling and why. There are also technical rules. Specialists know the songs that fit a cave's resonance, the place name that must be uttered to open a particular fissure, and the precise sequence of libations to Pachamama that will keep the moisture gods from soaking. So, place names matter. Calling a spring by the wrong name is like ringing the wrong office and asking for your passport to be renewed by someone who never hired you. The ritual is exacting because the underworld is particular. Each worker has preferences and each subterranean spirit and etiquette that insists on acknowledgements. Now, psychopompic beings in the inner world can be generous collaborators or exacting creditors. Serpents may guide a soul along hidden corridors, but they will expect their due. An offering left in her crevice, a libation of chicha, a bundle tucked under a stone. And water spirits do not do charity. They respond to reciprocal practice. The living rites, songs at the spring bundles in caves, care for recitation of lineage names, function as directional aids and as the receipts of a transaction between worlds. There is a social technology to the whole enterprise. Ritual specialists act as brokers. They translate household requests into appropriate offerings. They marshal mallki's consent and then narrate the place-name stories that authorize passage. Communities institutionalize these procedures so that passage is not random but legible. Younger ritualists learn place by place which chant opens, which shaft, which cloth placates, which rock spirit. And that knowledge is ecological memory as much as religion. It encodes which water sources are reliable, which terraces respond to certain libations, and which fissures have historical claims attached to them. Practically, and these rites are compact and purposeful. A libation at dawn, a bundle slipped into a cleft, a whispered name for an ancestor, a song intoned to match echo and throats. These acts make passage possible and keep the household's archive of place affiliations current. They ensure that the inner world's power is not arbitrary, but habituated into ongoing reciprocity. The living do their part, and the subterranean keeps it consults. And there is a kind of tenderness in the choreography, turning so, placing a bundle, whispering an ancestor's name. And these domestic gestures are small liturgies that acknowledge continuity. Seeds will sprout because the inner world has been tended. Memory will be retrieved because mallki are consulted. Passage will be negotiated because the specialist knows the song. The subterranean guides are pragmatic. They want the right offering, the correct name, and a show of care. Provide that, and the underworld will cooperate. So, in sum, travel to Ukhu Pacha is navigated by an ensemble of serpents, warders, specialists, and ancestors who together form a protocol for movement between worlds. The serpent signals the way inwards, the amauta lights the track with place names and song, mallki and kinly authority, and bundles translate needs into negotiable rights. It is a system less of terror than of etiquette, ancient logistics for dealing with the Earth's interior, and If you must go down, it is infinitely preferable to do so with a named ancestor, a respectful bundle, and someone who knows the local snake's favorite snack. God and Inhabitants, Pachamama, mallki, apus, Shadow, and the Subterranean Company. Ukhu Pacha's court is not a courtroom, but a comfortably complicated household. An under-earth sitting room. The obligations are tabulated in bundles, and everyone knows whose turn it is to bring the coca. Pachamama sits at the metaphorical head of the table, not a distant deity, but a hands-on Earth Mother who both nurtures the seeds and keeps a very long memory of deaths. She is guardian and guarantor. The offerings laid in springs and fissures are the household's IOUs, and crucially, the receipts that keep the underground economy honest. Ancestors in the Unders are not quietly archived, they are active corporate partners. Mallki, or mummified forebearers, carefully preserved and sometimes hereded, function as social people with influence. A mallki is consulted like any respected elder, asked for counsel, asked to witness agreements, and occasionally carried in procession to lend weight to a claim. They are not ghosts in the attic. They are seated at a family table, lending political and economic authority to kin lines, and reminding everyone which terraces are family business. The Subterranean Company also includes apus and huacas that blur the line between mountain and interior. Apus are the powerful mountain patrons whose shadows reach into Ukhu Pacha. Huacas mark sites of power, a fissure, a spring, or stone that require maintenance and attention. These are place spirits with persistence. They both claim offerings and supply favor. Bind those obligations with the right libations and bundles, and the site responds with water, seed, and the ecological memory that keeps terraces producing. Ignore them and the field sulks, which is less dramatic than a curse, but much worse for your potatoes. The court operates by reciprocity. Kin lines and the ILO network organize who gives, what, and when. Ritual economies are domestic ledgers as much as they are devotional acts. Offerings are scheduled, bundles are composed with exactness, and ceremonial attention is a distributed responsibility. The practical outcome is intangible. Households maintain their relationships with Pachamama, mallki, and local huacas, enjoy social support, access to water, and an archive of place knowledge that guides planting, irrigation, and repair. Ritual is thus a form of resource management, rich, small, and theological. Now, specialists mediate. Priests are mouthers and cavekeepers know place names, the proper songs, and the composition of acceptable bundles. They act as clerks of the subterranean court, translating household requests into ritual flight and ensuring that names are called correctly. An important business, because a misnamed huaca is the spiritual equivalent of mailing your rent check to the wrong apartments. Their competence keeps the household's economy from fraying. They read the mallki signs, interpret apus moods, and recommend what the soil actually needs, beyond good intentions. Pachamama's double role is quietly exacting. She is a mother and register keeper. She feeds the seeds that will feed the people. But she also keeps a ledger of neglect, libations that while heads bundles tucked into crevices, and seasonal offerings are not merely pious gestures. They are contractual acts that reserve the soil's potency. The domestic liturgy of planting, turning the soil, dropping in a seed, humming the right song, is a small, repeated negotiation with the underworld's claims. And these gestures keep the inner world propitious and the household gardenically solvent. The mallki cult reinforces social memory and political continuity. When an elder's mallki is carried in procession, the community is reminded of their ancestors' deeds, land rights, and obligations. The mallki's presence legitimizes claims, mediates disputes, and anchors slave obligations across generations. In short, mummified ancestors are both library and legal counsel, an embodied archive whose testimony is respected because it is visible, fed, and publicly acknowledged. There is tenderness in iconography. The domestic sacred economy treats soil, seed, and memory as intertwined goods. A shoveled furrow, a lump of cocoa, a rift bundle. These are small gestures of attentiveness that make passage, fertility, and familiar continuity possible. The subterranean code expects politeness and punctuality. Give what is due, call the place by its name, and the underworld will, in its own deliberate manner, repay you. Ultimately, Ukhu Pacha's company is civic rather than capricious. Pachamama, mallki, apus, and huacas form an interlocking system of guardianship, obligation, and ecological knowledge. It is a code where the verdicts are practical. Water where there was drought, seed where there was barrenness, remembered rights where memory might fail. And where the work of ritual is the everyday maintenance of social and environmental commons. So, keep the books balanced, feed the right spirit, and the household below will keep your world growing. Judgment, reward, and cultural function, reciprocity, fertility, and the active archive of the dead. Ukhu Pacha's verdict, a less metaphysical thunderbolt and more household accounting. The ledger here is reciprocity, and the evidence is very practical. Harvests, water, and whether your neighbors still speak to you at markets. Offerings, remembered names, and ritual care are the receipts that prove our family has kept its side of the bargain. The ancestors and earth spirits respond in kind. Do the bookkeeping correctly and the soil pays out. Neglect it, and the field sulks, which is about as subtle as a tantrum, but again, rather worse for your potatoes. Ritual reciprocity is the actual education. Success is measured in things that can be counted. Fuller claries, reliable springs, fewer sick children, and a hillside that does not slide away in the next heavy rain. So, a well-maintained schedule of libations, bundles, and mallki attention creates an evidentiary record for the underworld. The living show up, the dead are fed, and the subterranean household keeps its promises. That record is the community's proof that obligations were fulfilled, and that the world continues to supply. The reward, in the literal sense, is potency and intercession. Ancestors who are housed, fed, and named become active allies. They intercede in crisis. They lend authority to land claims. They are consulted about migration or irrigation decisions, and they can be asked to tip fate toward favorable weather or fertility. A properly provided mallki is a political asset as much as a sacred relic. Family prestige accrues to those who maintain the dead well, because social memory and practical advantage travel together. Failure, by contrast, shows up as social ecological consequence rather than eternal damnation. Droughts, bad yields, outbreaks of illness, or the collapse of terraces are read as signs of broken covenants. The household has failed to feed its dead, pay the huaca, or perform the right apology rites. The remedy is public and corrective. Renewed offerings, formal apologies, reburials, or the reconstitution of bundles. These apparative acts are theatrical and technical. They restore the social ledger and, often, the environmental balance as well. The work scales up. Mallki politics and ritual feasting redistribute resources. Kappa kocha, or high-altitude offerings, and state-level ceremonies historically appeared to Ukhu powers on behalf of entire polities. The Inca and pre-Inca rituals that placed goods, and sometimes people, on the mountaintops are extreme versions of the same logic. Send your best and your valuables into the interior to secure water, seed, and the favor of earth power for many. In ordinary life, ritual feasts and offerings function as a kind of social insurance and a means of redistribution. Shared meals, offerings, and public rites circulate resources where they are needed and visibly documented the obligations that govern them. Practically, the underworld functions as an active archive of memory and obligation. Mallki bundles and huaca offerings keep lineage histories available for consolation. Names invoked aloud at planting or at a spring are not mere sentiment, but mnemonic devices that anchor water rights, terrace claims, and seasonal knowledge across generations. The archive is performative. It is made current by the ritual acts that refresh it, and communities treat that archive like a working file, consulted, updated, and occasionally corrected with ceremony. So, in sum, Ukhu Pacha's judgment is a practical calculus of give and take. Offerings and remembered names secure fertility and health, while provisional ancestors return potency and political capital. Neglect produces measurable disorder that must be publicly repaired. The underworld's call is therefore civic and ecological, a moral economy in which ritual upkeep is both evidence and policy. Attend to it in your fierce response. Ignore it, and you will learn, to your great distress, that the earth keeps very exact accounts